Our next item for today comes from Marty Scoveland Jr. at Task and Purpose. And he wrote a really interesting piece on a new debate that's going on about the olive drab berets that are being issued to the 1st Security Assistance Brigade. And there's been really little in the news about them, about the new unit and it being stood up. Essentially, it will be a deployable brigade, or a series of brigades actually that they've planned to take the place of 12-man A-team Green Berets. That is what they will end up doing. And so there's a similar ideology here that's going to go hand in hand with some of the tasks that Green Berets do. And then there's the headgear. It is an olive drab that, for me, being freaking colorblind, I don't know that I can tell the difference. They look almost exactly the same as a Green Beret, as what's issued to the Green Beret, and it has a lot of people up in arms, despite the fact that it was actually chosen and designed by the Chief of Staff, by General Milley. One senior NCO currently assigned to the 1st SAFB, who requested anonymity, told Task and Purpose all these decisions, beret color, patch, flash, crest, etc., all of them came from the Chief of Staff. And I don't know about you, it takes me back to when I joined and everybody was so angry about the black beret. I never had an issue with it. I did, as far as the history goes and as far as leadership choices go, I did think that it was disrespectful to the Ranger Regiment as a whole. I think that there was other ways that we could have, made us as soldiers look better, look more like a unit, or what. I'm not sure exactly what General Shinseki was trying to accomplish with that, but there was a lot of anger about it. There was a lot of people that didn't want to leave the patrol cap, the people that thought it was disrespectful to Rangers. And continuing on with this one, the beret controversy isn't the only issue many veterans have with the new unit. Some within the Special Forces community are already casting a side eye at the new unit's patch, nickname, and mission. The patch resembles the old MAC-V Recondo patch used in Vietnam by some Special Forces soldiers. It includes a tab that initially said Advise-Assist until recently when it was changed to Combat Advisor. One NCO threw out there about that he thinks that it's disrespectful to Green Berets and it detracts from President Kennedy's intent when he first approved of the Green Beret. This is a symbol of a legacy that has been created by the sweat and blood of thousands of men. It's earned, not given away. So,
well, that's really interesting what you say about the headgear and about the terminology. We were talking earlier about how words matter, symbols matter, because they send a signal as to the direction the Army is going in. And this notion of creating entire brigades whose focus is advise and assist, it reminds me of the early efforts, 7 to 8 years ago to create RAFs, or regionally aligned forces. This idea that we're going to have each brigade, have a specialty in a certain area or in a certain COCOM or combatant command. I mean, the United States is already the only country in the world that divides the entire planet up into essentially military proconsuls, CENTCOM, SOUTHCOM, EUCOM, and we've got soldiers all over the world in hundreds of bases. I believe there's about 70,000 soldiers in SOCOM, Special Operations Command now. It's about doubled since post 9/11 or since the 9/11 attacks. My question is the intent to saturate the world now with conventional U.S. military advisors? And are we concerned that there could be blowback from placing SFABs and SOCOM trainers all over the world? And are there other tools besides the military tool, like we talked about last week in Niger, that might be more appropriate? We're sending a signal when we put, conventional soldiers into SFABs or security assistance brigades and give them headgear that looks a whole lot like the Green Berets. If the goal is to SOCOMify, for lack of a better word, the entire Army and turn us into a global advise and assist force, I think you are going to see some pushback from elements within the military, and I hope from some elements within the State Department who probably think they can do that mission more effectively and less bellicose than the U.S. military.
Absolutely. I think that any advised role that we have has to really go to the heart of the mission of the host forces. And I was really impressed with the government of Niger for declining that armed drone during that whole thing that happened with those 4 Green Berets. Not that they needed air assistance, but the idea that they actually do want to make those checks and holds, and they actually do want to have a conversation about the kind of force we have in the area, and are those forces ours? Are they ones that are actually under our control? If we're sending out these new brigades to places and all we're doing is doing counterterrorism training, small unit tactics, but nothing that actually helps them as a host military, we're not actually concentrating on things that are good for all soldiers, spending time on marksmanship, spending time on fortifications within their own country that are useful for them. Sorry, I'm spitballing here a little bit, but is exactly like what you were talking about with the State Department. And the State Department has always been a very strong link between any special forces mission that's going into a country and the administration, because they have to make all that possible. We don't ever broadcast it. We don't ever tell people we're sending you 6 teams of Green Berets. A whole bunch of civilian-looking guys in civilian clothes show up at an airport, and they go off and they do their mission. So, but yeah,
and it does also complicate this whole of government approach. The old way was that the ambassador was the senior American coordinator for all U.S. efforts in the country. Yes. The one exception to that, of course, is that any military forces that fall under the combatant commander, the regional combatant commander, so in this case, AFRICOM, if it was in Niger, those forces do not fall under the purview of the ambassador in the same way. So we're not getting that whole of government approach. We're essentially stratifying and creating two distinct entities, the military and the State Department. And the reality is the reason we have foreign area officers is because they're supposed to coordinate a whole of government approach for the country. And so this idea of advisory brigades, while in and of itself is not necessarily a bad idea, it raises a whole lot of questions about how we approach advisory capacity throughout the world, and whether or not that's always the best way. And we talked about this last week with destabilizing fragile regimes by empowering the military and making coups more likely or more possible. I think we have to think long and hard about every single soldier that goes overseas, that every single deployment has to be looked at with a fine-tooth comb. And that maybe that's my dovish tendencies, or maybe it's me hoping for something that might resemble sober strategy in the future.
I hope so. That would be awesome. But yeah, I don't have much hope for it. What do you think about the possibility for like MOS Mission Creep in this circumstance? Like post 9/11, lots and lots of different MOSs were assigned to do essentially infantry roles. There's a lot of variation in that, and sometimes you got guys out there that were very, very, very undertrained. We just went through this horrible thing with what happened to the 4 Green Berets in Niger. In terms of having the skill set to do what Army wants you to do at any given time, and what's going to happen to these guys? I mean, are they going to say, well, they're close enough to Green Berets now, send them on that kill op, send them on that whatever op, when they're not ready for it? I mean, the best training we usually get for deployments is in the 3 months before the deployment. That's generally it. So if we have anything else, it's left from other training that we went to. I could see that mission creep just steadily going on and going on. And again, like this, AFRICOM, holding up their hands like, how did this happen? We know exactly how it happened. They just don't want to say it.
Right. Well, I love what you're saying about this MOS creep. I think we're going to see it as we train more and more conventional advisors. They're going to lack the training, the team building, and the capacity of those special forces teams. There's a reason that the A team, which is usually the primary trainer in these environments, there's a reason why it has every single man on that team. There's a specialty for everything. 12 has been determined to be the correct number. They work together in small unit tactics for years. They have special language training, they're supposed to. They have special weapons training, special medical training, and they know how to employ assets. They know how to employ other enablers, airstrikes, artillery, in a way that just 12 officers and NCOs drawn out of a combat brigade and told suddenly that they're advisors and assisters, they may not be able to to achieve that. And special forces teams, while their main mission is not kill capture, they have been trained in that as a secondary task, and they're prepared to turn into a kinetic raid force. And I'm not certain that an SFAB that probably has at most trained together for, like you said, 3 months is going to be able to do that. But there will be the tendency, and there will be the temptation when intelligence crops up at headquarters to say, well, we got 12 soldiers out there. Yeah, they're not Green Berets, but, well, they're our best hope. So send them after, Abdullah whoever, and then they walk themselves into an ambush. So, I mean, I think this is incredibly dangerous. And I love what you say about this MOS creep, because we see it time and again. Just like we use soldiers to do State Department tasks, I think we're asking soldiers to become Green Berets, and that's just not realistic. And this is even after we've doubled the size of SOCOM, which in and of itself probably has weakened some of the capacity, because there's no way that 70,000 are as easy to train as 35,000.
When I mentioned that Black Beret thing before, I had a thought about that. We went through a whole huge period of years post 9/11 where Army enlistment standards were slimmed down, it's cut down and cut down and cut down over and over again. And I worry about that in terms of this, is that, they're not cutting people out of the Army or saying you're not good enough, you're not bad enough, but that, I'm sorry, I lost my thought. But that it's a watering down of expectations. It's a consistent, doing that. And I know that a few of the soldiers that I served with towards the end of my time in the Army, you could really see that. You could see how basic training and little things like that had been cut down. And so you combine with our already post 9/11 environment of needing lots of troops, of using lots of troops, and trying to get them through with the most minimal training. And then on the other hand, you have this MOS creep where, like exactly what you just described, no, they're not technically qualified, but there's 12 guys and they're going to go really give it their best chance. No, this is not the way that you build a military, the Army. It's not. And like you mentioned about how much is getting layered on SOCOM, I think it's simply done that for the exact reason that you mentioned, that SOCOM not being, I guess that units might get tasked to an ambassador when and if they might need it, right? But because all of these units are under combatant commands, does that ambassador know that he's got 4 teams of Green Berets that are 60 miles down the road in his country? I mean, it seems like there's been that kind of loss of communication with the cuts to the State Department. Right,
absolutely. And with the talk of cutting the State Department by 47%, hopefully that'll get tempered in the reality of sausage making there in Congress. But the head diplomat, the ambassador, is supposed to be the chief of mission. And the chief of mission is supposed to have a unity of command, one of the principles of warfare, unity of command. And I doubt they have it. But what's interesting is, that diplomat, that ambassador, is going to be the one that's going to be scrambling to explain to the host country what happens when one of these 12-man teams that potentially is undertrained, potentially isn't as capable as a special forces team, when they get themselves in trouble, or when they cause an atrocity, or when there are civilian casualties, or there are American dead, you can bet it's going to be that ambassador who's going to be left holding the bag to explain it. And if he doesn't have full knowledge of what's going on within his purview, that just doesn't seem right. And I want to take one other thing you said and use it sort of to transition, I think. You mentioned the enlistment standards and how they had dropped from, especially around the time of the surge, 2006, 2007. Iraq is falling apart.
That was the worst time of it, absolutely.